And this is my favorite part of the entire fish. What's up, y'all? I'm Reed the Fishmonger, and today we're gonna teach you how to fillet and my favorite ways to cook a cubera snapper. All right, first thing we wanna do is pick up the pec fin, puncture underneath those scales. Make sure you wedge underneath the scales and not trying to cut through them, but when you go under them, it slides right in, and we're gonna slide our knife right out underneath the belly, flip our knife around. Again, we wanna slide underneath those scales instead of trying to cut through them. You can see where the skin is smooth and then it starts to have those scales. We're going to follow that outline. That way, you don't lose any of that meat behind the head. Even where that outline is, if you cut straight down, you're gonna lose that little pocket of meat right behind the head. Now we're gonna flip our knife around and have our knife almost at a 180-degree angle. If your knife is out like this, you're in for a long journey all the way down of sawing motion. Instead, have your knife like this. If you ever taken scissors to wrapping paper, when you hit that smooth glide, it's super satisfying. That's what you're going for here. Instead of those chops, we're going for the smooth glide. And having a nice obtuse angle like this is what helps you, woo, just like that. Wipe those scales off. Now that we've got that opening, we can wiggle our knife in, make sure it's resting right on top of that skeleton and pull towards the head, letting the skeleton guide your knife. If your knife is right on top of that skeleton as you slide down, you make sure that you don't lose any of the meat, and we don't want our knife at a hard angle into the skeleton like this, a very gentle sloping angle just like that. Now that we're to the center, use the tip of our knife to go all the way to the top of that spine. You see how it stopped pulling on the meat once you went to the top of that spine. Tip of the knife, base of the ribs, angle your blade slightly up. Make sure your knife is not levitating, but resting on the skeleton. And separate the connection the pin bones make to the ribs. Look at that. These bones right here were connected to the pin bone line. This right here are the pin bones, and they were connected to the rib bones. You just separated the connection they had to each other. That way you can lift up on this fillet, dip your knife right on the other side of that big center spine, and start the same process, sliding your knife right on top of the skeleton, letting the skeleton guide your knife. Once you get to the end, we're gonna come back to these rib bones and slide down them, letting those rib bones guide our knife. If your knife is not pushing on the rib bones, then you can lose out on some of that meat. Now the rib bones end right here. You can see the tips of those bones. Once you see the tips of those bones, you can now come down at a harder angle and cut down just like that. And now you have the entire fillet separated. It's just connected right here. My favorite part, have just the tip of our knife poking out like that and slide on over, da-da-da-da, and roll off your beautiful cubera snapper fillet. Flip it over, pick up the fin, go behind the head at an angle, sliding your knife underneath those scales, come all the way down. You want the whole thing separated just like that. Twist our fish around, and on this side, you still want your knife at the same angle, so you're gonna have to move your body a little bit to make sure that your knife still has that angle. So my body is gonna be up here, my left hand supporting the fish, and my right hand pushing down, making a nice, long, smooth line all the way down. Wipe those scales off. Now I'm gonna move my body over here because I want nice, smooth, long motions. I'm gonna push on the fish's body a little bit. See how it lifts the spine off the table a little bit? That'll help with my angle. Make sure your knife is resting on top of the skeleton. That way you don't lose any of that delicious cubera snapper meat. And now you can see these little micro tears. You're gonna use the tip of your knife, go to the top of that spine, one nice smooth swoop. That allows you to pick up a little higher on the fillet without tearing any of the meat. We're gonna go tip the knife, base of the ribs, angle your knife slightly up just like before. We don't want our knife like this. You're just gonna end up cutting straight through the ribs. We wanna go around the ribs, not through the ribs. And now we're going to give it a little flick all the way to the top. That just separated the connection the pin bones make to the ribs. Now we can lift higher on our fillet. Use the tip of our knife to dip down on the other side of that spine. Once you have this side right here cut through, We're gonna circle back around to the ribs. And you guys, this is my favorite snapper for grilling. Cubera snapper love munching on lobster and crab, and it gives their meat a delicious flavor. It has a higher fat content than a lot of other snappers with its tough skin, making it a primo choice for grilling. So going over the ribs on the second side, we're gonna lift up on that fillet, take our knife like this, and we're gonna wiggle it right on top of those rib bones. Wanna make sure that pec fin is not in your way. And you see how we can knock on those and you can hear that's bone? That's because we're scraping super close to them. That's what we want. So look at that. You can knock on those bones, we're scraping them clean, that's exactly what we want. That fin out of our way, your knife pushing on those bones as you slide down. Now, once you get to the bottom of those bones, it's not continuing any further. Once that happens, you can cut straight down. So we'll do that to each bone. Once we get to the end of it, cut straight down. That is a way to go over the ribs. You have all the ribs right here. None of them are on your fillet. And now we're to one of my favorite steps right here. We're gonna close that right on top of our knife and throw all of those scales at cameraman Cam. Roll that fillet over and look how beautiful that Cubera snapper is. But we are not done. There's a ton of meat left on this fish, and if you stop there, you're missing out on some of the best parts of the entire fish. This next step calls for a serrated knife, or if you've got bolt cutters, those work great as well. We're going to pick up this rib cage right here, take our serrated knife, and cut all of the ribs out just like that. There's a good amount of meat between each of these. Just want to get some of this thicker membrane off. And look at that, you got yourself a rack of Cubera snapper ribs. Now, if you prefer bone out, that's easy too. We're gonna use our non-serrated knife, and we're going to find the bottom of each rib bone and slide your knife right underneath each one of those rib bones. Just like so. Find that rib bone, make sure you're cutting very close to that bone so that way you get as much of that rib meat as possible. Obviously, you will get a little more meat if you leave the bones in, but this is still a good alternative, and it's better than wasting the rib meat. Now that it's released from these bones, you can reach in there and cut it right out just like that, and you've got yourself boneless, skinless Cubera snapper rib meat. And that's not my favorite part yet, but it's still a great part of the fish. Most snappers you don't get satisfying cheeks out of, but this is the world's biggest snapper species, and you know there's gonna be a good cheek in there. So you can see the scales on the face, just like filleting. We're gonna let those scales show us where that cheek meat is, and you can see this very subtle line right here. We're going to puncture right there, because that's where the meat is starting. Twist our knife around, follow that scale line. Then we're gonna just use this part of the knife to scoop into that cheek. Then you'll hit a little bone right here. We wanna go right on top of it and scoop underneath that whole lip, just like that. Slide underneath that lip just like that. It'll release the entire cheek. You'll get a larger lift, and we call this the finger, the meat that is right on top of that lip all the way up here. Now that you've gotten all the meat off of the face, it's just attached to the skin. We're going to try to make a nice, long, smooth line across. Now we can start peeling our cheek. Look at that. Woo! That is a big cheek for a snapper, and it looks absolutely phenomenal. Look at that. Solid bone right there. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this entire thing, but you really don't want to miss my favorite part of this entire fish. It is a small morsel that you just have never had before, and you've got to try it. We're gonna open that face up, and you see the center piece right here? We're going to puncture the membrane right here on both sides. Now we're gonna stick our knife through just like that and pop it out. This will release this entire throat. Now we're going to outline that throat. It's nice and hard right here. We're gonna rest our knife on that and slide around it. Just like so, just like so, and look at that. This is a Cubera snapper throat, and it is the bacon of fish. This is thin, crispy, buttery. Well, it's not crispy yet, but that's the way you should cook it. And this is my favorite part of the entire fish. You guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a killer day.